he saved our screen game, hasn't he? He has revived the screen game in Seattle.
Yeah.
So even though he's not like pulled up any trees or sort of shone yet, I think he will in the future, and I think this 1-2 punch is so valuable.
With our season as it's gone so far, would we have preferred one of the guys that were drafted after our player?
I'm gonna come to a decision because the listeners will be screaming, just make a fucking call, will you? Sitting there on the, so I'm gonna make a call.
Yeah. Welcome back to the We Talk Seahawks Rookie Watch podcast, where we will be today getting into our first rookies and our second-year players. We'll be readdressing Zach Charbonnet and Anthony Bradford's draft positions and potentially discussing some other options we could have gone with at those positions. And we'll be getting into our rookies' output in the recent game. A close-fought thing that I feel like we let them hang around in that game longer than we should have done, but we'll pick the bones out of it. So, joined tonight by my co-host James. James, how you doing, pal?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Like I say, another win. Finally, back on the winning trail. Another week of interesting performances and sort of stories about our rookies and talking points. Like I say, another very nail biting win, as we already do nail biting wins, but we're back in the win column, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, it feels like an important one as well with the games we've got coming up. We certainly would have chalked it up as one that we really needed to win, and I think if you just look at it hypothetically, like if perhaps we get a win against the Rams and then lose those four really difficult ones, we still end up 7-7 with three easier games potentially to finish off the season and a playoff run. So, we put ourselves in that position where we can have a miserable month and still be set to go. So it almost feels like we've got a few free swings at the 49ers, and that feels great to me. I mean, maybe do you think that's a negative take, or do you think that's? What do you think?
No, I think it's a massive stretch coming up, isn't it? It's gonna make or break our season. So no, I don't think it's a negative take. I think, yeah, I completely agree with you. To be honest, I think it's a massive stretch, and we need to hit form coming into it. So no, I agree.
Yeah, cool. And then of course there's three last games that I referred to as easier. I don't think any game in the NFL is easy because every player has earned the right to be there, and the coaches all relatively know what they're doing. But the Titans, the Cardinals, and who was the other game in it? The Steelers. Those games all look relatively winnable. So looking forward to that. So our rookies in the recent game against the Commanders. What did you think of? And this is, I'm going to start with Witherspoon because he seems to be the name on everyone's lips at the moment, and I felt like he had almost had a bad game by his own standards, but still had lots of good moments in it. How did you feel? Has he set a high bar for himself? Is that what I'm feeling here?
Oh, he's set an incredibly high bar for myself. This is what I'm now calling like the Tariq Woolen effect. With Tariq Woolen's rookie season, we now expect Tariq to be having headline players every week and holding him to a standard that's unaccountable. Witherspoon, if you were to actually go and look at like the sort of the wide receiver passing rating allowed from quarterback to receiver, it's probably 20, 30, something ridiculous like that. I can't remember a McLaurin or anyone like that getting a big catch on him. And obviously he's got that fumble as well, doesn't he? Forced that fumble, so excellent.
Yeah, his QB rating's really good, and it's even his QB rating is higher in single coverage than it is when he's assisted by a safety, which is funny. But I think that's partially because the flea flicker that caught him out is a bit of a stain on his stats, and it ramps all his numbers up. And at that point, he wasn't the only person in that area when it was thrown. I think there was a safety in that area as well, and they don't call that single coverage. So his single coverage QBR rating this year is 30. He's targeted with 13 passes. 2 of them are complete for 39 QBR rating, which is nuts. 2 out of 13.
That's what I mean. When you think that one flea flicker is still the only negative really thing that's happened in his rookie season, like, and that wasn't entirely his fault. Like it's mental. It's absolutely mental. So yeah, he just continues to blow us all away. Even in his quieter weeks, he's still just because you're not hearing his name called doesn't mean he's doing it.
Yeah, and it's frightening, isn't it? How quick he's learning. I feel like he's learning from everything in real time.
Yeah.
Some players take a few years to really sort of get comfortable at the NFL level. He's just ducked to water with it, and this is his first year in the NFL. He could be 10 years in the NFL, hopefully all of them with the Seahawks, but he could be with us for 10 years, improving every year, which is a phenomenal thing to think about. So yeah, I'm super happy with his output in that game, but I almost feel cheated if I don't see him nailing a quarterback or taking an interception to the house, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just want to see him jacked up and screaming and shouting and celebrating something every game. But maybe that's his personality. Maybe we're all just living in his world at the moment and wanting to see fireworks on the defense coming from his corner of the field all the time. So next one we're going to talk about. Actually, is there one that you want to speak about? Because Witherspoon was my choice.
I'm happy to talk about anything. I think, obviously, I think Zach Charbonnet's performance has gone a little bit unnoticed in terms of, yes, he's only had 6 carries, but when you look at his average per carry at 7.3, 44 yards, had a couple of receptions, 4 receptions as well for 18 yards. So, that's 10 total involvements in the game, if you want to put it like that. They're steadily increasing his workload. He's steadily looking more like a back who is fully capable of sort of being handed the reins if we need him to, which is what we've said all season. He's just going to continue to improve towards the latter end of the season. And like I say, I just love the way he was running. You can see his vision and his IQ is starting to improve. His confidence behind his runs is starting to improve. So I think he's really starting to come along. And the other one's JSN, isn't it?
Yeah, JSN had a particularly good game for me. Just before we move on to JSN, just my 2 piece on Charbonnet there. There seems to be a bit more decisiveness about what he's doing, and there's a bit of sort of a bit more sort of directness and purpose, and he kind of, it's almost like he's found he understands his role, and he just makes sure that he either, just if he is going to get tackled, he leaves something on his man. And we've seen a lot of running backs at with the Seahawks doing that over the years. So he's very much incorporating that into his game. I don't think that's something they would ask of Ken, but I have seen Ken do drop the shoulder on people a few times recently. So maybe that's the Charbonnet effect rubbing off. On the subject of JSN, I think you're absolutely right to mention him. I think it's the earliest we've seen the ball put in his hands after the snap. In any game this year. We've seen Gino trying to throw the ball to him at the end of his routes quite a lot. We've seen some horrific mistakes come from that as well, with some badly timed interceptions. We seem to be trusting a little bit more in JSN. I think Gino's trusting in him a little bit. He knows a 3-yard, 4-yard pass to JSN can easily turn into a 15-yard run with the skill he's got. And I think we saw a lot of yak snapped up by JSN, and it looked. Do you know what's funny, James? It looked like JSN from college when you saw the way he'd, grab the ball. He was sharp, turn, assess the field, pick a direction, and go. It was very reminiscent of some of the way he carried the ball after the catch in college, and it looked like we tapped into his area of expertise with the way we were, approaching targeting him. Did you get that feeling too?
Yeah, totally. Do you know what it is as well with JSN in terms of what he's bringing to the team? He's saved our screen game, hasn't he? He has revived the screen game in Seattle.
Yeah.
We've not been able to do it for donkeys from my
it's
entire
quite an achievement, actually. Yeah,
it's quite an achievement when you think about that. Throughout my entire fandom, I've never seen us run one successful screen. JSN comes along. It took a few weeks, took the early half of the season to ease him in, and now all of a sudden he's just brought back to life Seattle's screen game, and it's fantastic.
And I think he had a word in Will Dissly's ear as well, because he had a successful screen in that game too.
So
there you go, rubbing off on people there. I completely agree. I think there seems to have been a little bit of a like a watershed moment for JSN. He seems to be over his. Maybe those touchdowns helped. Maybe people started to realise within the organisation that his strengths lie in a slightly different sort of scenario, and we can put him in those positions on early downs as well, which was the best thing about that for me.
he's forced our hand, hasn't he, in terms of the screen game, because that is his skill set. Other than him, before him, we haven't really had a receiver that's kind of forced us to use the screens. Like we can use, even though Doug is a kind of similar build, he was, a deep shot guy, vertical guy. Didn't really run screens with Doug. So GSN's skill set is, like you say, he's the first read, get the ball in his hands, get blockers in front of him, and watch him go with the way he cuts through the field. Like you say, that's exactly what he did at Ohio State with absolutely lethal efficiency. So he's come in and kind of, I can imagine them saying, look, we have to work a way to get the screens into our playbook, because this is that guy, that's his forte. So he's forced our hand in that respect, and thank God he has, because he's added an entire new element to our playbook.
Yeah, and it's a good one as well for giving us options on third downs as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes on third downs you want to, if it's third and short in particular, you certainly you want to work in something where you can get the ball straight out and just get someone to get a few yards after the catch, whether it's in falling forward or taking on someone one-on-one in a physical mismatch. You kind of want to get the ball out of hand quick and just get it done. He's perfect for that, because he might not only get you that 2 yards, maybe 3 yards on third and short. He could actually turn that into quite a sizable run with the field vision he's got. So good to see him put in those positions to succeed, and he really maximised it, I thought. One more I want to talk about. It's from the game, that is, and that's Jarek Reed. I thought he put another highlight reel special teams tackle in the books, and I feel almost at this stage like the quality of his special teams play is keeping some players out of the 53 on match day. We've got a lot of inactives on match days at the moment, and you'd think someone who wasn't playing many snaps on defense or offense would be an obvious candidate to be an inactive, and yet we keep him around, and I can't help but feel that is because of how effective he's been on special teams. What's your take?
Yeah, interesting you bringing that up. He's a continued name that we like to drop in there, and like I say, this week he's moved, I think, second now. As I'm looking at the stats, he's moved second in the NFL in special teams tackles. There's only Brendan Schooler of the New England Patriots that has more with 11. Jarek Reed has 9. So there's only one more player in the entire NFL that's making more impact plays, making more tackles on special teams than Jarek Reed. So he is becoming what we thought he was going to become, and that is our special teams captain. Like I say, Nick Ballore probably still officially has that role, but it feels like he's kind of passing the baton on to Jarek Reed at this point. And like I say, like as I kept saying, with where we drafted Jarek Reed, if that's what we get with the upside of potential, a guy who can come in on sort of unique little packages that they want to run. It doesn't have to ever be a 3-down starter for where we drafted him. But if you can find your special teams captain of the future, if you can find a guy who can fill in a bit like I was going to say like Ryan Neal, but I know Ryan Neal has was proved that he could be start worthy, and Jarek Reed might as well. But just guys like that can come in, surprise you a little bit when he goes on the field, goes back to special teams and becomes the captain. We had Nico Thorpe, who's a coach now, never really made that much impact on defense in terms of going out there and playing meaningful snaps, but was kept around, was the special teams captain, big locker room guy. And like we said, yeah, special teams is such a valued thing in Pete Carroll's team and defense. So he puts so much value on it. So they'll be absolutely loving Jarek Reed.
I was going to say between our two kickers, Dixon and Jason Myers, and the special teams unit, it's probably our most consistent area of our team, because offense can't do it for 4 quarters, and defense has been kept out there so long that they're absolutely knackered by the end of a game, and they've dropped off slightly in their consistency. Special teams has been an absolute highlight since the very first game of the season. So you could make the point that being the most consistent or best player on our best unit possibly makes him our MVP. So there you go. And a shout out as well, while we're talking special teams and MVPs, to Jason Myers, who had an absolutely outstanding week and got special teams player of the week this week in the NFL. So further, just to punctuate the point about special teams being great,
yeah,
there's a big point there for you. So section 2 of our podcast this week on the Rookie Watch, we're going to talk year 2 focus. Usually I'd pick a couple of players to talk about here, but honestly, as I mentioned to you, James, going through this earlier on, I looked at every one of our year 2 players, apart from Bo Melton, who's obviously, I think, still with the Packers. Every single one of our players, with Trey Brown included, because he's third year but missed a year, they're all worthy of mention in some way. I'm going to mention the first one because there's a bit of a storyline developing that I definitely want to make sure we discuss. But after that, you can pick the next target for discussion. So I'm going to mention Kobe Bryant. And the reason I mention him...
That's where I was going to go, so it's fine.
Okay, good stuff. Well, we weren't going to miss it then. So Kobe Bryant has been... Well, last week he was a healthy scratch. And from the way that Pete Carroll put it, I think it was yesterday evening or the day before when he was asked about Kobe Bryant, he hinted that he was potentially fit to play last week, but the week before, but was a healthy scratch for the Ravens as well. And my take on this is based on opinion only, and there is no statistic backup for this at all, which is not like me. I usually come up with some kind of stat or figure. But my take is that at the beginning of the season, we tried to transition Kobe Bryant into a hybrid nickel defensive back, safety, box safety, a blitz specialist guy. We've kind of turned him into a bit of a versatile piece on our defense. And he is currently on a Seahawks roster that is absolutely packed with versatile defensive backs and blitz. We've got Bobby and Jordan Brooks consistently thrown into blitz packages too. So, is he a victim of our own decision to turn him into a versatile defensive back now that he's fit and considered not required? And to contrast my point, on another roster, if he was coming off injured reserve and he was that versatile, can play corner, perimeter, nickel, play free safety, strong safety, potentially be used as sort of a pseudo linebacker as well in some blitz packages. If he was on another roster that didn't have versatile backs, would he have been an immediate elevation off injured reserve to be someone that could cover 3 positions on a depth chart? And is that just not needed on our roster?
I think that's exactly the point of Kobe Bryant. That's why he would come off, because he has got that versatility. He can play inside, he can play outside. So I think that's why he would come off. Like you say, with us, we're just blessed with depth at that position at this moment in time. Like you say, Trey Brown's emergence now has just added to that as well. And you've even got guys that we know that they haven't been playing well, but Pete trusts in guys like Michael Jackson further down the depth chart as well. That's there looming large for Kobe Bryant. So it's a really tough. You couldn't really pick a position in terms of cornerback to find a harder way back into the lineup with the Seahawks at this point, could you? With Tariq, Devin, and all these guys that we've got there. As soon as you start missing time, it's becoming extremely hard for you to get your job back off those guys. I think another thing worth mentioning is that sort of trend of that big nickel as well with Jamal Adams. I think you're seeing it a lot. He's not really playing as a strong safety. He's playing more of a big nickel towards the line of scrimmage as almost like a third linebacker. Even though you've just got Bobby and Jordan Brooks as your two in the middle. They are sort of using this big nickel package with Jamal a little bit more as he's starting to get healthy, in my opinion, from what I've seen. I might be wrong, but that's just what I seem to be seeing out there. I'll leave that to the official coach and status to confirm or deny that, and the film breakdown is. But from my eye test, that's what I'm seeing at least, or that's what I'm seeing that the plan looks like it's going to be. So again, that takes away the need for a true nickel corner. So I don't know. Kobe has never. I've never truly been sold on it. Any of our longer term listeners will know that. Pez has always been a big Kobe Bryant fan, and I am a Kobe Bryant fan as well. But there's something, whether it's his sideline speed, his hitting ability. There's something that just screams to me he doesn't fit. A bit like like an Ugo Amadi, sort of like he's in that spot, and he just doesn't do enough to be a Pete Carroll corner, for someone that Pete Carroll trusts enough. Ugo, I think he's with the Saints now and plays with the Saints and still plays meaningful snaps, still plays for the Saints every week. But you could just see that, people liked Ugo, but it wasn't enough. He just never quite did enough. Just never took that one extra step that sort of said to everyone, oh yeah, okay, we're fine with Ugo. There was always that and ahhing over Ugo. It was split. Half of the fan base liked him, half the fan base didn't. I'm getting that same vibe with Kobe Bryant and with those kind of guys in a Pete Carroll defense, and this one in particular, which has is rivaling the LOB in terms of the defense that Pete Carroll's had. It's going to be so hard, in my opinion, down the road for Kobe Bryant to come back into this team unless there's injuries at the position, which there might be, and that seems to be his best way back in at this minute.
Yeah, well, okay. If I'm Kobe Bryant, I'm cursing my luck, because on any other year, Jamal Adams was injured in the first game, and he was already back on. He was already in a starting meaningful position. But touch wood, no injury in sight for Jamal Adams at the moment. I mean, I think this is probably the most football he's played for the Seahawks in a single season.
Yeah.
I mean, in 3 years, right? Because the last two seasons have been a write-off. So, so everything from here on out is a bonus, right? Because he's done more, and let's not forget that he's earning a large wedge of our salary cap. So it's great to have him out on the field, and I do feel like he's made a big contribution. So should Kobe come into the roster, hopefully it's not at the cost of Jamal Adams and whatnot. So. So we'll talk about another one now. This one would be your choice. So is there a player in particular you want to bring up from the class?
Obviously, my eyes are immediately drawn to Boye Mafe, but we've spoken so much on Boye, even in the main pod. So
special mention, those fine.
Special mention is fine. Yeah, I suppose he's done enough to warrant another special mention. I think with breaking the sack record, pretty amazing.
Yes.
So yes, obviously he deserves all the praise and as much praise as we can possibly give Boye. Tariq's an interesting one in terms of not starting the season, as like I said a little bit before, the Tariq Woolen effect, not starting the season as kind of not this is the weird way of putting it. Has he started the season as well in terms of, all right, he might not be getting interceptions, but again, if you look at the QB rating allowed, passer rating allowed, it's probably about level as what it was last season. So in terms of playing his receivers, playing the quarterback, he's probably playing just as well. It's just he's not been getting these interceptions. Those have been falling to other people. Obviously, Devon Witherspoon is another big mouth to feed in terms of the interceptions. He's going to suck up quite a few of Tariq's interceptions as well. And obviously, teams have been wanting to test out this new rookie, Devon Witherspoon. They know what they're going to get with Tariq. Mm-hmm. Test out Devon. They've quickly found out that that's a bit of a shit way to go as well. But that he's fell foul of that as well. But you're kind of seeing it. People are going, "Oh, is Tariq a little bit of a, was it a bit of a one-season wonder?" I don't think it is. I just think he's not getting the interception in his hands anymore. But I think he's playing technique-wise just as well as he's ever played.
Yeah, well, his stats in the last game were, I think it was 6 targets, two catches allowed for 6 yards. Every time they've thrown at him, the teams have gained an average of 1 yard. That's ridiculous. That's great. So in essence, they've targeted him half the amount of other players and got no change out of him. No. That's fine. I mean, shutdown corners. I mean, it might be generous calling him a shutdown corner after 1.5 seasons, but essentially you are a shutdown corner if people don't want to throw your way. So yeah, as shutdown corners go, he's seen the amount of targets that are sort of par for the course once you get that kind of status of not being targetable. The one thing that I will say about Kobe Bryant is that teams are tending to screen players his direction because his lack of physicality in one-on-one scenarios and his arm tackling and lack of physicality and technique in tackles after the ball's been catched does find him slightly lacking. It's a clear element of his game that needs work, and when the ball does get some action on his side, it tends to be in scenarios where people have worked him out a little bit. So I think the areas of his game that need work have been highlighted by where teams have targeted, and I think when he has been targeted through the air, he's shown that he's still got that length and speed advantage that he always had.
Do you know what it is? It seems like with receivers, when you sort of see him behind the receiver, the receiver turns his back, catches a quick slant or a quick out route. When Tariq comes down and hits a receiver from the back and wraps him up, he seems to handle those tackles pretty well. I don't really see him breaking, receivers breaking tackles on it. It's more the running back, isn't it? When they're coming downhill, going with the shoulder a bit, trying too much to punch the ball out instead of wrapping up. Whether that's a confidence thing, whether it's a nerves thing, I don't really know. Obviously, he's a bit like Devon. He's a bit of a, he's not a big physical corner. Obviously he is height wise, but sort of strength wise and muscles wise, he's not a ridiculously overbearing athlete at the corner position. He's just got the size, hasn't he, and the speed. So whether he sees these big running backs coming downhill and thinks, I'll just try and go for the football instead of trying to wrap him up,
or just chip him and let someone else finish it off.
Hook Jamal's behind, or Diggs, who will just go and hit anything that moves. But receivers, I think he tackles and plays the receivers quite well. It's just the running back. So Pete Carroll and stuff and everyone, that is the hyper focus of this defense, and missed tackles. We're saying it every week. So I have no doubt that they'll be working with him on it. Just saying, look, if you don't want to wrap up and tackle them, at least let's find a better way of you trying to tackle them. So I think it'll improve.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we expect a lot from him just because of the way he started out. I think he's still way ahead of the trajectory that we set out for him as a fifth round cornerback. To be honest, if we got the level out of him that we're getting this year, consistently for the next 5-6 years, he'd still be on this roster as a starting corner. Absolutely. So any improvement on his game from here is just we're spoiled, to be honest. I'm going to mention Abraham Lucas, because big news there this week that he is back practicing this week. It is magical news. I'm really pleased with it. I think everyone benefits from this. The tight ends that have been glued to the hip of a backup tackle this week will be slightly further up the field blocking, so that Ken can rip off a few more yards when bouncing out wide. I think Ken will benefit from some better space to utilise. JSN will see more field without so many 12 and 13 personnel sets. I think when we have got those 12 and 13 personnel sets on field, they'll be utilised more as actual weapons. Just honestly, one player you wouldn't think would have so much of an impact, but genuinely, when you can leave your tackle on an island and back him to do his job independently against good quality opposition, you get an extra 10 to 20% out of a lot of players, and that really does mount up. So very pleased to see him back. I'm assuming you agree with all the nodding.
Yeah, totally. Like I say, let's remind everyone that in a lot of people's opinions, this was our best offensive rookie tackle last year. I think he had a better year than even Charles Cross did, and Charles Cross was excellent. So it just me and look, fair play to Storm Forsyth. He's stood in. We've won games with him at right tackle. Let's tip our hat a little bit. He hasn't been amazing, but he's filled in at a position that isn't his natural one. And he's not an amazing football offensive tackle anyway, is he? He's not your starter, even as a left tackle in his natural position. He's more of a career backup kind of guy. So fair play to him. He's stood in, and we've won football games with him in there. But the level of improvement that we are going to get at that right tackle position with Abraham Lucas come back, like you just said, it benefits everyone. Gino, all the receivers. I didn't even
mention Gino, but Gino as much as anyone.
More time to throw in that pocket against some big defensive lines, big front sevens coming up. More time to throw in that pocket. It is just going to hopefully take this offense to the next level that we've been waiting and been frustratingly avoided of so far this season.
Since week one.
Since week one, yeah. Hopefully that's going to open the offense back up to more improvement.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think so too. Absolutely, love that. So. Derek Young also likely to be fit. Whether he's active or not on game day, we don't know. Don't need to dwell on that one too much. Nothing to talk about game-wise because he's not played a snap this year outside of pre-season. And we'll quickly touch on Trey Brown, who is a guy that I'm really falling in love with on our roster, because I love it when a lower draft pick starts to really get meaningful snaps and a proper role on the roster, because as soon as that happens, you tend to know that they've almost out delivered, that they've more than returned on the investment in them. And I feel like Trey Brown's really enjoying his football. He's making impactful plays, making big plays, and he's playing with a smile on his face. And after the injuries he's had, I'm very, very pleased for him. It's a really good feel good factor on our roster.
Yeah. All right. I love Trey Brown. I love these guys that just have for whatever reason, have time away, injuries, coaching, times on the side in terms of being benched or whatever, and come back and just light it up. And it's just been a, like you said, we're just so spoiled in this cornerback room. The fact that you've got, Trey Brown, he doesn't get the headlines. Devin Witherspoon gets all the headlines. Tariq gets all the headlines, and rightfully so. And Trey Brown comes back after a long layoff and just says, "Oh yeah, I'm pretty good as well. I'm another corner. I'm still here. I'm pretty damn good at football as well. Getting tackles, five. I think it was 5 solo tackles, 1 assist from the Commanders game. Only bettered by Bobby Wagner, which is ridiculous. It's just, I love guys like that just, they don't take. He could have quite easily kind of, felt sorry for himself, beaten himself up, not come back in the right mindset, but he's come back in the right mindset, fully healthy, and is making football plays. Brilliant.
Yeah, love it. It does feel good. And you made me laugh there when you said about him having like Bobby Wagner-esque stats with the amount of tackles. Oh. I almost feel like teams, they've been targeting Spoon and they've been targeting Reek, and then the backup comes on. Oh, we can target this guy. And, oh no, he's taken out to the house. Oh no, nailing our wide receivers. I love the fact that we can mix it up, swap players in, sit someone down, let them sit out for a few snaps, and the guy that comes in is headhunting immediately. That is fantastic. So couldn't ask for more than that, in my opinion. That's three outstanding corners, and none of them has more than a season and a half's experience in the NFL. Which is bonkers. You'd think that there'd at least be one veteran corner in there, sort of stabilising the ship and keeping balance. But it speaks to all three of them in terms of their mental side of the game, that they're able to operate at this level without that experience at this level. I think that for all three of them, that's quite a standout thing.
Yeah,
in my opinion. So we're gonna, before we move on to our little fun redraft that we'll finish the pod with, I'm very quickly gonna touch on Dre'Mont Jones, because whilst I appreciate he is not in any way, shape, or form a rookie or a second-year player, I do feel like some of the adaptations with our roster and Dre'Mont Jones over the last week or so will affect some of our rookies and second-year players. And by this, I mean that moving Dre'Mont Jones to the outside linebacker on the right, where Nwosu had previously been playing, this is a really interesting adaptation, because whilst he clearly can play as a right defensive end in a 4-3, which he's done before, which is possibly why we're using him as an outside linebacker on the right of our defense. It's not something I saw coming, and I think we're using him as a big end like we used to use Red Bryant right on the end of that line, and we've had players like Poona Ford that have played outside as a defensive end, and we've had Jaron Reed play as a bigger end. We've had Benson Mayowa play as a larger defensive end and with the intention of crushing the pocket from one side and flushing running backs and quarterbacks out to the other side, where we've got a edge rushing outside linebacker preying on whatever sort of flees the pocket. So I feel like there might be an aim to kind of push the play towards Maffei. Also, we had teams sort of choosing to run at Darrell Taylor when he was on that side, and putting a big defensive end on one side and Maffei on the other really does dry up those sort of bounce it outside options, I think. But the real reason I'm mentioning it is that potentially with him moving to the outside, players like Jaron Reed might well be playing more defensive end as a 3-tech. We might see more snaps there for Cameron Young. Derek Hall, who had been playing starting snaps on the right edge, would now be going back to his usual 20% of snaps in rotation. So Derek Hall potentially and Cameron Young may see changes to their snaps because of this move. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I think a lot of it boils down to the other move for Leonard Williams as well. That when you think of, there is so much congestion in that interior of the defensive line in terms of mouths to feed, snaps to get people out there. Leonard Williams wants to be a 3-down guy. Jaron Reed wants to be a 3-down guy. Dre'Mont Jones wants to be a 3-down guy. And you just can't realistically give 3-down roles to all three of those guys on the same line at the same time. You just can't do it. So they've probably looked at, do you know what, Dre'Mont had a slightly kind of, quiet start to his Seattle Seahawks career. they obviously feel like he's got the physical traits to be able to cover in an outside linebacker position. Similar kind of build to like a KJ Wright, not a quick guy, not slow, but not a quick guy. He's not like a Nwosu fast outside linebacker, not like a Boye Mafe or anyone like that. But he's not a slouch. He's a big guy. He probably defends the run pretty well. And it might just open. It's a bit like sort of both figuratively and literally taking a little bit of a step back, taking sort of Draymond out of that kind of madness that is the line of scrimmage, and you know, you don't really have sort of, you know, the vision is very limited. You're just trying to see ball, get to the quarterback. Draymond Jones all of a sudden gets a bit more daylight, gets to see the play sort of develop in front of his eyes a little bit. Maybe it improves his IQ a little bit in terms of what he's seeing, learning this Seahawks defense, so he can actually sort of stand off it and see what the defensive line is doing a little bit more now that he's not sort of in there just, you know, hacking it up with all the other guys. Learn the techniques a little bit more, learn his players about a little bit more. But mainly it's about, you know, throwing Leonard Williams in there as well. You've got to feed him. You've got to feed this guy, and they're just trying to sort of not oversaturate, not over-egg the interior defensive lines pudding, and just said, you know what, Draymond, you come out a little bit. Let's give these guys a bit of room to breathe on the interior of the D line. We feel you can play this position as well. We've had an injury there. We could do with maybe an extra body. You could play that position as well. And that's what they're doing. So I think you can make cases for technique and just pure mouths to feed and congestion in that interior D line for me. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is really interesting. There's a lot of angles to come at it from. And before we move on from this, having mentioned it, I'm just going to point out the difference this makes from the opposition's perspective. Because if you're lining up Darrell Taylor, who's going to try and beat you with speed, and then Derek Hall, who's going to beat you with speed, you know, you give them. Granted, guys who rely on different ways of bursting off the line. With, you know, they open with different moves. They gesture different ways and stunt different ways. But Draymond Jones is going to beat you with the ball rush occasionally. He's going to stunt inside, taking the shortest possible route and trying to drag you inside with him, you know, through the gaps. And that's different to what he's going to get against the other guys. So there's something to be said for, rather than going, okay, we'll rotate fresh guys that are similar, to going, most of the snaps are going to go to a guy who's going to beat you with power. And then when the tackle's tired, we're going to give him a different nightmare and send out the speed. You know, that there's a lot to be said, I think, for keeping tackles guessing. What do you think?
Yeah, totally. It's like say similar skill sets and not, you know, becoming a bit too one-dimensional at times. Maybe they're perhaps worried about being that, and just again, you know, I mean, this team, I think we're fifth in sacks. So I think we've got 30, which is, I can't remember the last time. It's probably those Legion of Boom days where the Seahawks were leading the league in sacks, or at least in the top 5. So the production that we're getting there is immense anyway. And that hasn't really been coming from Draymond Jones anyway. It would seem stupid to move a Jaron Reed.
He's had 3 or 2.5 or 3 in 7 games. Under half a sack a game.
Yeah,
you know, so he's not been lighting up the world in that respect.
Yeah, so it feels like there's bigger producers of those sacks there. So they're probably looking at like who's the one we could afford to move in that kind of sense. So it would be Draymond in terms of not losing that sack production. And let's say it might open him up to more sacks as an out. He might sort of evolve into a different kind of player, a different monster at the outside linebacker position. So Pete Carroll doesn't just do things for when we're 6-3 team. His defense is excellent. He's not going to risk that by making a stupid move if he doesn't feel there's you know, merit to it and there's credence to it. So let's see what he's cooking.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a nice plan. We've seen it from him before with the big end, and I can see exactly why they're sort of playing around with that. And it was actually one of his games, probably his most announced game. But he seemed to be on the commentator's lips a bit more. And maybe that's what you get when you come off the edge. Maybe you're a bit flashier when you're coming off the end rather than being in a melee in the middle. But he's certainly got a bit more love from the announcers in the game. So we'll move on now to section 3. So we'll have a little bit of fun here. Some hypothetical scenarios. Anyone who's listened to the recent Rookie Watch podcasts, we have addressed our most recent draft class, and taking a look at who was taken immediately after those players. So we can hypothetically say, with our season as it's gone so far, would we have preferred one of the guys that were drafted after our player? So the first one we're going to talk about is Zach Charbonnet, who was taken with the 21st pick in the second round, so the 52nd overall? It's 52nd overall, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 52nd overall, out of UCLA. And following his selection to the Seahawks, the Bears took Gervon Dexter, defensive tackle, Florida. The Chargers took Tuli Tuipulotu, outside linebacker from USC. Rashee Rice went to the Chiefs from SMU, wide receiver. Tariq Stevenson went to the Bears from Miami at cornerback. John Michael Schmitz, who was a guy that we were very high on in the pre-draft process, from Minnesota, center. I think he was first center off the board, wasn't he? So he was center 1 in this draft. Luke Shoemaker, tight end Michigan, who I think was tight end number 4 off the board, I think. Dalton Kincaid went before him. There's quite a few, actually, wasn't there? There was the lad who ended up at the Lions as well. I feel like the lad who went to the Lions.
Yeah.
Forget the name, but he's made a real splash. And then Osiris Torrance as well, Florida offensive guard. So would you, if you could have it back, would you potentially take any of those over Zach Charbonnet with the way our season's gone, with that context?
So hard, this one. Gervon Dexter, I'm going to say no, because of our interior defensive line player anyway. I like the player, but I think, again, like we've just talked about, he would just be over-egging an already perfect pudding anyway. And you've drafted Cameron Young and a few guys, Mike Morris as well, who's been injured as well. So they address the interior, the defensive line. So I'm not going to go there. Rashee Rice, interesting player. Don't really need him. Again, JSN and the receiving room that we've got is excellent anyway. And he hasn't really taken on the wide receiver 1 role that's wide open in Kansas City like I thought he would. He's probably the de facto wide receiver 1, but it doesn't feel like he's a wide receiver 1 player at this stage in his career. Tyreek Stevenson, don't need. Just being straight up, don't need. Luke Schoonmaker, tight end, again. A, don't need. B, don't value the position. And then comes the 3 names that do catch my eye: Osiris Torrance, John Michael Schmitz, and Tuli Tuipulotu. That is quite a difficult surname to pronounce. I hope I'm not butchering that. So I'll just call him Tully for my benefit. Tully, I think it's only Byron Young in terms of rookies that have had more sacks than he has. Tully's got about 4, and I think Byron Young has 5. So another pivot back to why Abraham Lucas coming back this week is potentially so important. You're gonna go up against a very good young pass rusher in Byron Young. But obviously he wasn't taken anywhere on this stage. So Tuipulotu, a 4-sack guy, outside linebacker, where we've had an injury in Uchenna Nwosu, to add another true outside linebacker there would be a big value to us at this moment in time. John Michael Schmitz, his start hasn't really got off the ground, had a few injuries with his shoulder. Also the New York Giants offensive line and offense and team in general, I don't know why I'm getting specific, the New York Giants in general are a dumpster fire.
Dumpster fire is the word I was going to use as well.
Dumpster fire.
Yeah.
So he hasn't really stood out or done anything yet, but I do like the player. But then I think, well, do you know what? Evan Brown's been excellent for us at centre this year anyway. Yes, he's only on a 1-year contract, but you'd have to presume that the Seahawks would be interested in extending him for a year or 2 further. So you potentially got your centre there in Evan Brown for the next few years anyway. So I don't think I'd swap him for John Michael Schmitz at this moment in time, even though centre is still a need going forward in the next few years. So then it comes down to Tuipulotu and Osiris Torrance. Now, Osiris Torrance is a really interesting one. I was banging the drum for Osiris Torrance to become a CLCO in the pre-draft process. Anyone who's in our Discord or listening to these, the pre-draft process that we did, I was a big advocate for Osiris Torrance. And I think he has played well in his rookie season so far. He's played 646 snaps for the Bills. Yep, as I remember where he went, the Buffalo Bills, who have also had their kind of wars on offense at this moment in time. But I don't think that's been down to Osiris Torrance, because on those 646 snaps, he's allowed just 1 sack. Now he has had 5 penalties, which is to be expected with a rookie. You see it with a lot of rookie linemen anyway, and with the way the NFL is played nowadays, it's incredibly hard not to draw holding penalties as an offensive line player. But 646 snaps and just 1 sack allowed is pretty excellent, and I was absolutely shocked that he'd fallen into the second round. I thought he was a lock to go round 1. I was more than happy for the Seahawks to take him at 20. He actually, like I said, I had him mocked at the Seahawks to 20. So this is so tough because I love Zach, and again another one I was a big advocate for, and this 1-2 punch that we've got with Zach is so important to our offense. So even though he's not like pulled up any trees or sort of shone yet, I think he will in the future, and I think this 1-2 punch is so valuable. I'm going around in a lot of circles here and delaying because I don't know what to say. I don't know whether to axe him or not. I'd feel like such a knob, and I'd feel like I've just backstabbed Zach after banging the table for him all this time. Say, oh yeah, I'll just swap him for. But man, I think a guard of Osiris Torrance's standard. When I look at our guards, that is the weak point. I do like Bradford.
I'll ask you this question then, with you being in this difficult spot. Do you think that we get the same or more quality out of Ken Walker this year and DJ Dallas as the backup number 2? Because let's not forget that McIntosh hasn't been fit to play. So would you get the same production from Ken and Dallas if Osiris Torrance had been a starting guard in our offensive line this year? Would that have been a difference?
100%. If they're running behind Osiris Torrance, 100%.
I think you might be right too.
But then I'd love to add Tuipulotu as well because of the injury. But then you can't foresee the Nwosu injury, can you?
For context, Tuipulotu is currently top 5 or top 6 top 6 favourite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's in the top.
Stop making it harder for myself. Stop making it harder.
This one's far harder than the next one, so we've got a bit of time to spend on this one. But
do you know what?
It's hard for me as well. I'm not sure. I just haven't decided either.
I'm not sure, but I'm gonna come to a decision because the listeners will be screaming, just say just make a fucking call, will you? Sitting there on the so I'm gonna make a call.
Yeah.
In terms of, like you say, you brought up another name there which I'd forgot, Kenny McIntosh. So they're taking another running back, and I'm just going to look at this, and I'm sorry, Zach, but for the sake of building a team and building a winning football team, these smart moves. I love Zach Charbonnet. I love what he could become, but he is RB2. You have got McIntosh coming back that would soften the blow of losing Charbonnet, and he might be an excellent young running back as well. He's a dual national championship winner at Georgia. He's obviously very talented. Surprised he dropped to round 7, so he's got something about him. You've got DJ. The value of adding a true offensive guard, starting offensive guard, in Osiris Torrance would outweigh the positives of keeping Zach. It would make our team better than having Zach at this moment in time. So I think I would go to, like I said, I would go Tully, but you can't foresee the injury of Nwosu, so I'm not going to. But Osiris Torrance, he plugs in is our best guard straight away. Massive upgrade, and then you can develop Anthony Bradford next to him as well. So do you know what I'm going to have to do?
And Damian Lewis contract year 2.
Contract year 2 is very inconsistent as well. I'm not a massive D-Lou fan. I'll hold my hands up. So yeah, fuck it. I'm going to have to.
I like it. So, I mean, looking at the way we did our redraft last time, we took the tackle/guard out of Northwestern, Skoronsky, over JSN. So there's a growing theme here that James just wants a guard in this team. So maybe we're going to see some deja vu here as well. But so the next pick we're going to talk about, this is the last one we're going to talk about this week. But Anthony Bradford, we took a guard out of LSU who, by all accounts, has shown a far higher ceiling than a lot of us anticipated this year, with really kind of excelling when he's been relied on to start. So after him, after we took Anthony Bradford with the 108th overall out of LSU, Dylan Horton, defensive end from TCU, came off the board. Adi Adebawore, who was a big focus of our pre-draft process, we really thought that he would become either a 3-tech defensive end in our system or someone that played on the edge for us out of Northwestern, who went to the Colts. Darwin Jones, who went to the Browns, tackle. Chad Ryland from Maryland. You had Clark Phillips as well, Utah cornerback. Chandler Zavala, who a lot of people were really high on, who went to the Panthers, offensive guard, and Roschon Johnson, another person we talked extensively about in the pre-draft process, who plays running back now for the Bears out of Texas. Thoughts?
Yeah, this one is a piece of piss. The other one was very hard. This one is a piece of piss, in my opinion. I am keeping Anthony Bradford all day long. I'll quickly explain why. Dylan Horton hasn't really played. Very rotational guy. No sacks on the season yet, as I'm aware. So a very, very rotational guy. Hasn't developed into a full-time starter on that Houston defense yet. So he doesn't look like sort of anything special at this point. It's hard to judge, but that's what we've got.
We can only use the context that we've got. Yeah,
we can only use the context. Adi, as he's preferred, or as we prefer to call him anyway. I don't know whether he prefers that. Adi, for our sake. Big guy in our pre-draft process. Another one who, I mean, the Colts defense is very good. Colts D-line very good. So it is a crowded room, a bit like ours. Similar kind of situation. I know different positions, but a bit like a Cam Young, even like a Derek Hall. He's finding himself in that similar situation yet, just waiting to break through, waiting for potentially an injury ahead of him to break through. But at this point, again, just the rotational piece hasn't done anything. So not for me. And like I say, the pass rushers we've got this year anyway, it's fantastic. Darwin Jones, very good offensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns. We've seen that. I think he's probably the best player on this list that we've got to pick from, or at least who's made the best start to their rookie class. But like I say, you can't foresee the injury to Abraham Lucas, and even so, we're still at the end of it, come out of it 6-3 and got Abraham Lucas coming back. So I'm not swapping him for Abraham Lucas or Charles Cross. And he hasn't really played guard or anything like that. So if there was that multi-position versatility, I'd say, do you know what? I'd take him as a guard. But he seems to be specifically an offensive tackle at this spot. So I'm going to say no there. Chad Ryland's a kicker, and we've paid Jason Myers ridiculous money to kick our footballs, and he's doing it pretty well this season. So we don't need Chad Ryland. And to be honest, Chad is a really douchey name. Like, I don't want a Chad on my team.
Okay. Fair enough. Good point.
Yeah, fair enough. That's all. He might be a Hall of Fame kicker, but I don't care. Clark Phillips, the third special teams guy, similar to a Jarek Reed, but is probably going to get a start at some point soon for the Falcons. They have got a few injuries at cornerback position, and I think Arthur Smith has alluded this week that he potentially will come in and start for the Falcons this week. So he's potentially a nice young player. But again, as we've talked about so much, as any Seahawks fan will know and non-Seahawks fan will know, we're pretty okay at the cornerback position. So I'm not going to take Clark Phillips. Chandler Zavala has been absolute piss poor. He has been horrendous so far through his rookie season. He did have that neck injury where he was carted off, that scary neck injury. So that's probably contributed to it as well. But he is fine now. And we know this Pro Football Focus, not everything, but PFF, Zavala has allowed 27 pressures, which is the second most on the team, and they've also given Zavala a 9.6 pass blocking grade, which is the second lowest in their entire database for the season. So with all due respect, I think if Zavala was on our offensive line so far this season, I think Gino would have been killed by now. And Roschon Johnson, again, a decent little running back, but we don't need running back. We've invested in Zach. We've got Kenny McIntosh coming back. We've got DJ and we've got Ken. Our running back room is fine. So I don't see a need for Roschon Johnson at all. And like we said, I quite like Anthony Bradford when he's been given his chance. Very good run defender, improving in pass pro. Seeing a lot of positive things about him so far when he's coming and playing. You're not hearing his name called. You're hearing Damian Lewis getting called for fucking holding calls every single game, hearing other offensive linemen getting called. Anthony Bradford's not getting called when he's in the game. He's doing nothing wrong, keeping his head down, improving. I think that's a really smart young guy they've got there in Anthony Bradford. So and like I say, I think that's one of our biggest positions of need, arguably our biggest position of need outside of a few others in terms of building the team. So Anthony Bradford, your job as a Seattle Seahawk is safe.
Very good, mate. So to summarise, from the 5 positions that we've discussed so far over this pod and the previous ones, we've talked about 5 different players: Witherspoon, JSN, Derek Hall, Zach Charbonnet, and Anthony Bradford. Of which James would only have switched 2 players for one other option in the subsequent picks. That was JSN. He'd potentially swap for Peter Skronsky. And Zach Charbonnet, he would potentially swap for Cyrus Torrance. Both occasions sacrificing a skill position player for enhancing our offensive line, and that, I think, is an understandable.
I think it was specifically understandable in the context of when we did that JSN one as well, hasn't he? Because he hadn't had a breakup game.
Because we look the context of picking them, with our season as it was, we were battered on the offensive line at that point. Yep. Okay, well, you've quickly made that little bit of small print there and thrown that in. Do you still feel the same? If we were doing the same podcast now, would you still be swapping Skoronsky? Because you said that to defend yourself, but I'm not convinced that you wouldn't still make the same call.
It would still be so hard.
Our offensive line's looking healthier, and JSN's been more involved. So I feel like both parameters have widened a little bit. Do you still? But Skoronsky still has that versatility of being able to play every position on the line. So he still brings something that we don't have in terms of a high quality, versatile piece. So there is still appeal.
I'd probably still have to go with Skoronsky, just using my head, building a team. As much as we love JSN, as much as JSN is starting to come into the team now and find his role, I think if you could find a true elite, which I think Skoronsky is and will become an elite interior offensive lineman, I think you're seeing so many years now. I mean, look at the receivers coming out next year. You could find, or it might not be as elite as JSN, but would be darn near close if you took one of the first 5 or 6 receivers, because there's some elite names in there. If you took a Romo Dunze, a Jalen Polk, or whatever, they would do pretty much just as well a job as JSN has done so far in terms of receiving yards, catching the ball. They're excellent elite receivers as well. So I'm like, what I mean is the gap between them and JSN would not be the same as the gap between who we've got now and Peter Skoronsky if you added him into the offensive line. So I'd still tentatively put forward my claim of swapping Skoronsky for JSN, but it's incredibly tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I think it's a harder decision to make now than it was then, but I still think it's the sensible move rather than there's not an awful lot of emotion attached to that. That is just a fairly sensible thing to say. So maybe when we do, give it another couple of weeks, maybe after the 49ers first game, we'll do another one, and I'll ask check in on your previous decisions.
Don't get me wrong, if he scores a touchdown, beats the Eagles, flips the bird, all that,
well, there might be some emotional attachment if he has a really big, memorable Seahawks moment, but also if the offensive line gains a pretty substantial amount of health and is our first choice offensive lines out there, you might change a tune. But I can't say I disagree with any of the decisions anyway. So a bit of fun there. I'm looking forward to getting to the end of the season and looking at what James's improved 2023 draft looks like when we've got all this in the book. So that concludes Rookie Watch this week. It's been a lot of fun, James. Thank you for coming on. Make sure you come and follow us on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Come and join our Discord. We've got a nice community in there. Lots of Seahawks fans. We're not big on shooting each other down. It's a free forum to voice your take, and we discuss it. We talk about the draft. We talk about the game. We talk about the game while it's playing. We talk about anything Seahawks, fantasy, anything you like to talk about regarding our Seahawks and our game to talk. So come and join us. And for this week, that is all we got. So I'm going to say go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.